The great throne hall of the Empire was silent, yet every soldier and servant inside felt a heavy weight in the air. The Emperor sat on his black stone throne, his cold golden eyes fixed on the line of women kneeling before him. They were his daughters, princesses of royal blood, raised in wealth and power. But tonight, he did not see them as jewels of his crown. He saw them as a weakness. "The blood of my line must be strong," the Emperor's voice echoed, deep and sharp like steel cutting through glass. "But what do I see? Daughters with soft hearts, daughters who weep for slaves, daughters who hesitate to kill. This is shame." The princesses lowered their heads. None dared to speak. They had seen the Emperor order executions with a single nod. They had seen him burn cities just to teach obedience. And now his anger was pointed at them. "You are not worthy of the throne as you are," the Emperor continued, his voice rising. "So I will send you away. You will be broken, reshaped, and reforged until only strength remains." Gasps filled the hall. Some nobles whispered in fear. The Emperor's words meant exile, and exile in the Empire was often worse than death. The eldest princess, Lyra, lifted her chin. Her silver eyes shone with defiance, though her heart trembled. "Father," she dared to speak, "we are loyal. We do not need this re-education." The Emperor's face darkened. The guards tightened their grips on their spears, ready to strike her down if he gave the order. But instead, he let out a cruel smile. "Re-education is not a choice," he said. "It is my command. You will go to the outer colonies. There, our trainers will change you. They will teach you pain, hunger, fear. You will learn obedience." The youngest princess, barely more than a girl, broke into tears. "Father, please, silence." The Emperor's roar shook the hall. His voice carried the weight of thunder. "Do you think the galaxy fears tears? Do you think enemies bow to kindness? No, they bow only to strength. And strength will be carved into you." The princesses trembled. None of them dared to resist again. Chains were brought forward shining, cuffs of black iron that clamped around their wrists. Even royalty was not spared from the Emperor's punishments. As the guards dragged them to their feet, the nobles whispered among themselves. Some mocked the girls as weak. Others looked away, afraid that mercy in their eyes would be seen as treason. The Emperor raised one hand for silence, his golden rings flashing in the torchlight. His words dropped like poison. "And there is more. You will not only be broken by the Empire's trainers. I have arranged something different." The hall stilled. Everyone leaned closer, anxious and curious. The Emperor's smile widened. "Cold and cruel. You will be taught by humans." Gasps turned into loud whispers. Humans, a species hated and feared by the Empire. Humans were small compared to most alien races, yet they carried a reputation for stubbornness, courage, and a dangerous kind of hope that could infect even the darkest heart. The eldest Princess Lyra's eyes widened. "Humans? Father, they are dangerous." The Emperor cut her off. "Yes, that is why I chose them. If you survive their influence, you will return stronger. If you do not." His gaze turned sharp as blades. "Then you were never fit to rule." The chains rattled as the princesses were pulled away. Their steps echoed down the endless stone corridors of the palace. Outside, black ships waited, their engines glowing like hungry beasts in the night. Lyra glanced at her sisters. Fear painted their faces. One clutched her chains so tightly her knuckles turned white. Another whispered prayers under her breath. Though the Empire allowed no gods but the Emperor himself. "Stay strong," Lyra whispered, though her own voice shook. "We will endure." But even she could not hide the storm in her heart. Humans. She had only heard stories about them. Stories of how they could fight like demons. How they could charm with words. How they never gave up even when crushed. Some said humans were cursed. Some said they were miracles. Lyra did not know which to believe. The shuttle doors closed behind them with a heavy clang. The last thing the princesses saw of their father was his cruel smile, sitting high on his throne, certain that his command would turn them into weapons. But deep inside, in places even the Emperor's chains could not reach, a spark began to burn. None of the princesses could name it yet. It was not fear. It was not obedience. It was something else. And when the black ships carried them away into the stars, none of them knew that this spark would change the Empire forever. The shuttle touched down on a barren world, its skies gray and heavy with dust. The princesses stepped out in chains, their royal robes already torn and dirty from the journey. They expected whips, cages, and cruel alien trainers waiting to greet them. But instead, there was silence. The camp was small, made of metal walls, and dim lights flickering against the wind. Soldiers of the Empire stood at every corner, their weapons ready. Yet the one who approached the princesses was not a soldier. He was human. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in plain gray clothes. His hair was dark, his jaw sharp, and his eyes steady, too steady. The kind of eyes that did not flinch, even when faced with royalty in chains. The princesses stiffened. They had heard stories about humans, rebels, fighters, and creatures with fire in their blood. But this one did not look like a savage. He walked with calm steps, hands behind his back, studying them as though he already knew their secrets. Eldest Lyra lifted her chin. Her voice was sharp. "You dare to look at us like that? We are daughters of the Emperor." The man stopped just a step away. His voice was quiet, almost gentle. "I know exactly who you are." The words made them uneasy. Not because of what he said, but how he said it. There was no fear, no worship, no trembling. He spoke as if their titles meant nothing. The youngest princess, still shaking from the journey, whispered, "What will you do to us?" The human tilted his head slightly, his eyes flickering from one sister to another. "Teach you." The word struck harder than a whip. Teach? None of them expected that. Lyra narrowed her eyes. "Teach us what? To crawl like slaves?" For the first time, the man smiled. But it wasn't cruel like their father's smile. It was quiet, almost knowing. No, to stand. The guards shifted nervously, as though his words carried too much. "Wait." The princesses exchanged quick glances. None of them could understand what he meant. Hours later, the sisters were taken to a cold stone hall inside the camp. A single fire burned in the center, throwing long shadows across the walls. The human stood before them, hands clasped loosely, as if this was no prison but a classroom. "I am not your enemy," he said calmly. "I am here because your father wishes to change you. But change does not come from chains or hunger. It comes from inside." The middle princess laughed bitterly. "You think we will listen to you? A human? Our father says your kind is dangerous, unpredictable, cursed." The man's eyes did not waver. "Your father is right." The room went silent. Even the fire seemed to pause its crackle. "But," the man continued, "dangerous does not mean weak. Unpredictable does not mean worthless. I am human. And if you truly wish to survive your empire, you will learn why humanity cannot be broken." The eldest princess frowned. Something about his voice unsettled her. It was not forceful, yet it pressed against her heart in a way no command ever had. The human stepped closer. His presence was heavy, yet strangely warm. "You were raised to obey," he said. "I will teach you to choose." The youngest princess whispered under her breath, "Choose?" As if the word itself was forbidden. The man crouched low, meeting her eyes. His voice softened, almost like a secret. "Yes, choice. The one thing your father fears more than rebellion. Because when you choose for yourself, no chain can hold you." The princess gasped. Her sisters quickly pulled her back, as though his words were poison. But in their hearts, a seed had been planted. The session ended, but none of them slept that night. His voice echoed in their minds, clashing against the Emperor's orders drilled into their bones. Lyra lay awake, staring at the cracked ceiling of her cold quarters. She wanted to hate him. She wanted to resist. Yet every time she remembered the way he looked at them, without fear, without obedience, her chest tightened in a way she had never known before. She pressed her hand to her heart, whispering to herself, "Why does it feel different?" And in the darkness, she realized something dangerous. Their father had sent them here to be broken. But this human, he might be the one to make them whole. The mornings on that barren world were colder than stone. The wind cut through the camp like a blade, carrying dust into every corner. The princesses huddled together for warmth, their royal pride slowly cracking under the weight of hunger and sleepless nights. It was in this fragile state that the human returned. He carried no whip, no weapon, no threat. Instead, he carried a simple loaf of bread in one hand, a jug of water in the other. The sisters froze. They were used to scraps thrown at their feet, not food offered like this. The eldest, Lyra, narrowed her eyes. Why would you give us this?" The man placed the bread on the floor between them. His voice was calm. "Because you need it." Her stomach twisted at the smell of food, but her pride forced her to hold back. The youngest princess, however, couldn't resist. She reached out, hands trembling, and tore off a piece. She chewed quickly, tears slipping down her cheeks. Lyra turned away, ashamed, but deep inside something stirred. No alien trainer had ever treated them like this. That night, when the guards left, the human returned again. This time he didn't bring food. He brought stories. He sat near the fire, speaking in a low voice. "Do you know how humans survive wars?" The middle princess scoffed. "By luck, I suppose." The man shook his head. "By standing together. We fight for one another. Even when everything is lost, even when the ground burns beneath our feet. We hold the hand beside us and we rise again." The fire crackled as silence fell. His words carried more warmth than the flames themselves. For the first time, the youngest princess whispered, "Is that why our father fears you?" The man's eyes met hers, steady and piercing. "Yes, because unity is a weapon he cannot control." The walls around their hearts, built by years of fear, commands, and chains, began to crack. Days passed, and the human kept coming. Sometimes he showed them how to endure the cold wrapping cloth around their hands, using body heat instead of shivering alone. Sometimes he corrected their posture when they trained, guiding with a hand on the shoulder, not a lash across the back. Each touch was brief, almost innocent. Yet to the princesses raised in a palace of cruelty, it felt dangerously forbidden. One evening, a sandstorm roared outside. The guards locked themselves in shelters, leaving the sisters alone in their quarters. The wind howled like a beast, shaking the walls. The youngest cried, clutching her sister's arm in terror. Then the door opened, and the human entered, his face half covered with a cloth mask. He carried a blanket, rough and worn. Without a word, he threw it across them and sat down back against the wall, his presence steady as a stone. The storm raged for hours, but inside, a different silence grew. The princesses leaned together under the blanket, their eyes drawn to the man who had chosen to stay with them instead of seeking safety for himself. When the storm finally passed, Lyra found herself staring at him in the dim light. Her chest felt tight again, that same strange pull she had tried to bury. "Why?" she asked softly, almost against her will. "Why risk yourself for us?" The man looked at her with those unshaken eyes. "Because no one should face storms alone." Her breath caught. Her sisters turned to her, wide-eyed, as if waiting for her to strike him for such bold words. But she didn't. She couldn't. Instead, she turned away quickly, afraid of what was breaking inside her. That night, she whispered to herself in the dark, Our walls are not holding. And none of them knew yet, when those walls fell completely, nothing in the Empire would ever be the same again. The camp had become a prison of trials. Every day the princesses were pushed to their limits. They were forced to run through the cold wind until their lungs burned, to lift heavy stones until their arms shook, to stand in silence while guards mocked them. But something unexpected was happening. Instead of breaking, they were learning. And at the center of it all was the human. He never shouted. He never struck them. He only showed how to breathe when your chest is on fire, how to tighten your fists not in rage but in control, how to rise again when your knees wanted to collapse. The youngest princess fell during training one morning, her knees bleeding against the sharp rocks. The guards laughed, but the human stepped forward. "Get up," he said quietly. She whimpered. "I can't." He crouched beside her, his voice steady but firm. "Yes, you can. Pain is not your enemy. It is the proof that you are still alive. Stand." Something inside her shifted. Through tears, she pushed herself up. Weak at first, then stronger. The laughter of the guards faded, replaced by silence. That night, when her sisters asked how she found the strength, she only whispered, "It was like his words gave me fire." Days blurred into weeks. Hunger still gnawed at them. Cold still bit their skin. But the sisters no longer wept in silence. They began to fight back, not with swords, but with will. The middle princess, once bitter and sarcastic, surprised everyone by defending another captive girl from the guards. She stood tall, her voice sharper than any blade. The human's eyes met hers afterward. He gave no praise, no applause. Just a single nod. And yet, that nod made her heart race as if she had won a war. But the true test came when the sisters were thrown into the pit. It was an old training ground, where captives were forced to fight wild beasts brought from distant planets. The sisters had only heard screams from the pit before. Now they were the ones shoved inside. The metal gate rose, and a creature crawled out, a massive lizard-like beast with scales black as night and teeth long as daggers. The sisters froze, fear washing over them. From above, the guards jeered. "Fight, or be eaten!" The creature roared, charging. The youngest screamed and stumbled back. Lyra grabbed her arm, trying to pull her away. Then a voice cut through the chaos, calm, steady, unshaken. "Breathe." It was the human, watching from the edge of the pit. His eyes locked on Lyra's. "Don't let fear control you. Use it. Focus." Her chest heaved, her pulse wild. Yet somehow his voice anchored her. She gritted her teeth, grabbed a sharp rock from the ground, and swung at the beast's eye. The strike was clumsy, desperate, but it made the creature howl in pain and stumble back. The sisters seized the moment. Together, they hurled stones, shouted, and struck until the beast collapsed in the dust. The guards fell silent. None had expected them to survive. The human's lips curved slightly, not a smile of mockery, but of quiet pride. In that moment, Lyra felt something awaken inside her. Not just courage, not just defiance, something deeper, something she could not name. Later that night, when they sat around the dying fire, the sisters whispered about what happened. "We should have died." The middle sister said softly, "But we didn't," Lyra answered. Her hand unconsciously pressed against her chest, where her heart still pounded. "Because of him." Her youngest sister's eyes gleamed in the firelight. "It feels like his strength is becoming ours." Lyra looked into the flames, her face half-shadowed, her mind restless. She wanted to deny it, to claim it was only survival. But in truth, she knew something had changed. The Emperor had sent them here to be broken. But instead, under the humans' watch, their blood itself was awakening. The sisters were no longer the same timid daughters who had been dragged from the palace in chains. The trials had carved them raw, and the humans' guidance had lit a fire inside them. But with fire came something else dangerous, forbidden. Feelings they could not explain. One night, the camp was unusually quiet. The guards were drunk, celebrating some imperial victory in the far colonies. The sisters sat together, whispering in the dim light. But their whispers were not about their father, not about the Empire. They were about him. The middle sister, bold with her words, smirked. When he looks at us, don't you feel it? Like he sees more than just broken daughters? The youngest blushed, lowering her eyes. He makes me feel safe. No one ever made me feel like that. Lyra, the eldest, stayed silent. She wanted to deny it, to shut the thought down, but her heartbeat betrayed her. Every time she remembered his calm voice guiding her in the pit, or the way his hand steadied her during training, her chest tightened with something terrifying, something she could not control. Before she could answer, the door creaked open. He stepped in. The human's presence filled the small room, quiet yet heavy, like the air before a storm. His eyes swept across them, and the sisters froze, as if caught speaking a forbidden truth. I told the guards you were to rest tonight, he said simply. No drills, no trials. You need strength for what comes. Lyra found her voice. And what comes? He met her gaze, steady as ever. Choice. The word cut deeper than any chain. Choice. A word the Emperor would never allow. He turned to leave, but the youngest suddenly reached out. Wait, her voice trembled, but not from fear. Why do you care for us? You are not like the others. The human paused. For a moment, silence stretched between them. Then, slowly he turned back. His voice was low, steady, but carrying a weight that made their hearts pound. Because I see you not as daughters of a tyrant, not as tools of an empire, but as lives, as souls. The sisters could not breathe. No one had ever spoken to them like that before. Not servants, not nobles, not even their own father. The middle sister whispered, almost in disbelief. Souls. The human's eyes lingered on them. His gaze held no fear, no greed, only truth. Your empire may own your names, your blood, even your chains, but your soul, that belongs only to you. His words struck like lightning. The walls they had built inside shattered completely. Lyra's heart thundered. She wanted to stand tall, to challenge him, but instead, she whispered, almost too softly, and if we gave that soul to you? The room froze, her sisters gasped. Even she could not believe the words that left her mouth. The human's eyes flickered, not with fear, but with something else, something dangerous, something forbidden. You must be careful, princess, he said slowly. What you offer could burn down your father's throne. The youngest clutched Lyra's arm, whispering in shock. The middle sister's eyes gleamed with mischief, sensing the storm growing between them. But before anything more could be said, a harsh voice barked from outside. A guard. Inspection. The sisters' hearts leapt. The human's expression hardened. Without a word, he pressed a finger to his lips, a silent command to stay quiet. Then he slipped out into the shadows before the guard could enter. The sisters sat frozen, their hearts pounding, their blood hot with the forbidden moment. That had just passed. When the guard left, silence returned. But it was not the same silence as before. Something had changed, something dangerous. They no longer feared the human. They no longer saw him as just a teacher. Now he was something else. And though none of them dared to say it out loud, the truth burned inside. The Emperor had sent them to be reshaped. But instead, they were falling into forbidden bonds. The bonds that could destroy an empire. The day of judgment arrived sooner than expected. The black ships returned to the barren world, their engines screaming across the gray skies. Guards stormed the camp, breaking open doors, chaining the sisters once more. The human did not resist, though his eyes followed them with a silent fire. The guards did not understand. The princesses were taken away, their hands bound, their faces pale, but their eyes were no longer the same. The royal palace was grander than memory. Gold walls, burning torches, banners of the Empire fluttering from the ceiling. Nobles and soldiers filled the throne hall, whispering in hungry anticipation. Everyone wanted to see what had become of the Emperor's daughters. The doors opened with a thunderous clang. Chains rattled as the sisters were dragged forward, but they did not stumble. Their steps were steady, their backs straight. Even with iron cuffs on their wrists, they walked like queens. The Emperor leaned forward on his black stone throne, eyes sharp and cruel. He expected broken girls, hollow and obedient. Instead, he saw something different. Lyra met his gaze without lowering her head. Her silver eyes no longer held fear. They burned with something unfamiliar, something human. The nobles murmured. The youngest, once timid, now stood tall. The middle one smirked, as if mocking the court with her silence. The Emperor's lips tightened. "You have returned. Tell me, daughters, what are you now?" For a long moment, silence filled the hall. Then Lyra spoke. Her voice was calm, steady, carrying across the marble floor like a blade drawn from its sheath. "We are not what you sent away, father." The Emperor's eyes narrowed. "Explain." Lyra stepped forward, her chains clinking. Every guard tensed, but none dared move without the Emperor's order. "You wanted us broken. Instead, we were awakened. You wanted obedience. Instead, we learned choice. You wanted us to bleed for the Empire. But now we carry a different blood." Gasps rippled through the court. The Emperor rose, fury flashing in his eyes. "What blasphemy is this?" The middle princess's smile widened. "It is not blasphemy, it is truth. Humanity runs in us now. Their strength, their defiance, their fire." The youngest added, her voice trembling but fierce, "And it cannot be erased." The hall exploded in whispers. "Human blood? Impossible. Treason!" The Emperor roared for silence. His voice shook the very walls. "Humans are filth. They are beneath us." But Lyra stood tall, her silver eyes glowing like steel. "Then why does their spirit live in us stronger than your chains?" The Emperor froze. For the first time in years, his throne felt unsteady beneath him. The nobles shifted nervously. Some turned pale, others clenched their jaws. The guards gripped their weapons tighter, waiting for the order to strike. But in that moment, everyone felt it. The daughters of the Empire were no longer the Emperors alone. Something new, something forbidden, burned inside them. The Emperor raised a trembling hand, his voice heavy with rage. "You dare stand before me, tainted with human filth, and speak as if you are free?" Lyra's answer was quiet, but it struck harder than any blade. "We are free." The words hung in the air like thunder before a storm. The Emperor's golden eyes flickered. Not with rage alone, but with fear. And in the crowd, whispers turned into murmurs, murmurs into doubt. For the first time, the unshakable throne of the Empire trembled. Not from rebellion, not from war, but from the voices of its own daughters. The throne hall was no longer silent. The Emperor's roar had shaken its walls, but the whispers of the nobles had become louder than his fury. Human blood? Could it be true? Look at their eyes. They are no longer the same. The sisters stood chained in the center, yet they looked less like prisoners and more like rulers. Their heads were high, their gaze unwavering. The Emperor slammed his fist against the armrest of his throne. "Enough! Guards, strike them down!" But the guards hesitated. They had seen the princesses face beasts, seen them return with a fire that no chain could extinguish. Some felt fear. Some felt respect. And in that hesitation, the seeds of doubt spread like wildfire. Lyra stepped forward, her chains dragging across the marble floor. "Father, you do not understand. You tried to strip us of weakness, but humanity taught us something greater than strength." The Emperor sneered. "And what is that?" Her voice cut through the air, calm yet burning. "Hope." Gasps filled the hall. The middle sister spoke next, her tone sharp, defiant. You taught us fear. Humans taught us courage. The youngest, her voice trembling but clear, added, You taught us to obey. Humans taught us to love. The words echoed through the chamber like a prophecy. The nobles looked at one another nervously. For generations, they had followed the emperor blindly. But now they were seeing something dangerous. An alternative. The emperor rose from his throne, his golden eyes blazing. You dare bring human corruption into my house, into my bloodline? You would shame your people and your crown? Lyra met his gaze without flinching. No, father, we would save them. Silence struck the hall. Even the torches seemed to burn lower, waiting for what would come. From the shadows, the human stepped forward. The guards had not even seen him slip inside, but there he was, calm, steady, unbroken. The nobles gasped. A human? In the throne hall, the emperor's rage turned to shock. You! The human did not kneel. He did not bow. He simply walked, until he stood beside the chained princesses. His presence alone felt like rebellion. They are no longer yours, he said, his voice steady. You sent them to be remade, and they were. Not into weapons of your empire, but into mothers of something greater. The emperor's face twisted with fury. What do you mean? The human's eyes locked with his. Into mothers of humanity's future. A future where your chains will break and your people will learn what it means to be free. The hall erupted. Some nobles shouted for their emperor, others murmured in awe. The guards stepped back, uncertain, as if afraid to touch the princesses now. The emperor drew his blade, golden and cruel. I will cut this infection out myself. But before he could strike, Lyra raised her chained hands. Her voice rang like thunder. We carry humanity now, not just in spirit, but in blood. The chain split against the marble as she pulled free with a strength no one expected. The sisters followed, their bonds shattering as if the iron itself feared them. The emperor froze, his blade trembling. For the first time, he saw not daughters, not weaklings, but heirs who no longer belonged to him. The crowd erupted. Some fell to their knees before the princesses. Others fled in terror. The palace shook with chaos, as if the very foundation of the empire knew its end had come. Lyra stepped closer, her silver eyes burning with human fire. She whispered the final words that would haunt the emperor forever. You wanted us changed, father. And we have returned with humanity inside us. We are your daughters no longer. We are mothers of a new world. The emperor staggered back, his throne looming behind him, but for the first time, it looked less like power and more like a prison. And as the torches burned brighter, the future of the empire shifted forever.